Hi and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. We've got our top for our EPP quilt completely finished. I was able to finish the quilting on the light color fabrics in the pattern, and I also have one line of hand quilting around the edge of the border. And then, to make things easy, what I did was I trimmed the top, the batting, and the backing all around the quilt. And I did that, let me measure for you. This one's probably easier. I did that 1 1/4 inches from the point of this piece. So every place that we had a point come out, I measured 1 1/2 inches and trimmed it and made sure that the corners were relatively square. So now I'm ready to put the binding on and be finished with this project. So I came up today to start working on that and film this for you. And what I've discovered is, in our effort to produce this project with very little purchasing, I have very little purple fabric left. I have the 1 1/2 yards length of fabric, about 12 inches wide. And then I have a few pieces, these were the larger ones width-wise, that are just short of 2 inches. So this one's a little bit bigger. This one is 2 inches all the way. So 2 inches, less than 2 inches, and then a couple of little pieces where they're tiny and we're not going to be able to use that. So my initial thought was I was going to put a French fold binding on that. And that is where you take a strip of fabric, you fold it in half, you sew that on the corner of the quilt, usually on the front, but you could do it on the back. You sew it on the front by machine or by hand, and then you flip it over and sew it on the back to give you your binding. Well, first of all, I don't have enough fabric to do it on the bias, so we're going to have to either do one of two things: either go buy more fabric if we can find it, or we're going to have to make it work the way it is. And just know that if you're doing a project and you're trying to keep your expenses low, you may have a situation like this along the way where you have to come up with a creative idea that will make it work for you. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at this piece of fabric that we have here. And we do, like I said, part of it is the selvage, so we're not going to be able to use that. And if you take that out, we have, I'd say, 11 1/2 inches. And it is long enough to do one full length of the project, the longer side. So we have enough just here to get 2 1/2 inches, at least 4 strips. So that's what we would need. And maybe just a little bit more, I'm not quite sure. So thinking about how we can do this, we've got a couple of choices. First of all, like I said, we're not going to be able to do a bias binding with the fabric we have, so it's going to have to be straight grain. And for this particular project, I don't see that as a problem because we've got no curves and we've got just the 4 corners of the project, so it should be fine. So we need to do a little bit of math. And if let's just take, for example, we're just going to use this section because this one is shorter, but we probably could get at least 1 strip out of that. So let's do this first. Let's take and trim off this tail. And we're going to use a big square for that, just so we kind of can keep track of where the edge of the fabric is and where it was cut before, and kind of keep it in a square with that. So we'll do that first. Now we've got two pieces. We've got this piece that's about a yard long. That's not right. That's not right at all. Let me actually measure it. Because I'm thinking, that's not a yard. It is close to it. It's 32 inches once you cut the selvage off. Okay, so then we have this piece. And just so we're all clear on what we have to work with, I'm going to measure it as well. So it is 1.5 yards. And the long side of our quilt from where we're going to sew is 1 yard and about 10 inches, so 46 inches. So if we can get 4 strips out of this, we have plenty of binding. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do binding. Like I said, let's see how good my drawing skills are today. If you do a French fold, this is the type of shape fabric you're going to start with. And you're going to sew it onto your quilt here, and then you're going to have a fold line here. So you have 3 outside pieces and 3 inside pieces. So if you're going to do a 1/2 inch binding, that's 1.5 inches plus 1.5 inches, so that's 3 inches. Okay, if you're going to use a bias, what we normally refer to as a single bias fold, that's a piece of fabric that looks like this. And then you're going to fold it on the edge right in the middle. So if you're going to do a 1/2 inch with this, let's say 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, that's 2 inches. Upside down writing. It's not my greatest, but it works. Well, we've got enough fabric to do that 2 inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own binding. And how we're going to do that is we're going to fold it in half. And we're going to press that down. And I've got the steam on in my iron, and let me tell you, if that thing shoots steam and your fingers are too close, you are going to feel it. So we're just folding that fabric in half. So now we've got a crisp folded edge, just a simple folding in half. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the top side of that, open it up a little bit. We're going to fold it in so that it is folded almost to the center. Just a fraction of the way away. And we're going to iron only on that outside folded edge, because if you iron in the middle, you're going to iron your half fold out. Okay, so we've got one side done. You've got that half fold, and then you've got the other piece folded in on itself. And then we're going to do that on the other side. Fold it almost to the middle. I do know there are some reliable online sites where you can purchase pre-made binding or pre-made bias tape. So if this is not your favorite part of quilting, you might look into that. It also might be something that I've thought about this myself. When I get to this point in a project, I'm kind of in a hurry to get it finished. Now, I do enjoy the hand stitching of the binding on this, so I'd love to do that. But the actual making of this tape is, or this binding, is not my favorite. So I've considered making some ahead of time, and I probably should have done this with this project, and then I would have realized I didn't have enough fabric. But I find sometimes when I'm videotaping to have videos to show you that I don't always think that far ahead. It's usually a mad dash to figure out what do I have, what I need to film and get it on the tape. So anyway, here we go. There it is. So this is a 1/2 inch binding. And we started out with a 2-inch piece of fabric that was 2 inches wide. So I can get it open. There we go. We folded it in half and ironed it, and then we folded each of those in half and ironed it. So that now we have, if you open it up, you almost have a little box there. We're going to fold one side in, the other side in, and then fold it in half. And that's our binding. And we're going to hand stitch that on both sides. You could open up one side and machine stitch it and then hand stitch the other. Since I prefer to do hand stitching and I find it almost as quick, I probably could sit down in the evening and have half of this done and then the next evening do the other half. That's what I'm going to do. And we're going to place this on the edge. And what I'm going to do is put a couple of pins in place so you can see what this is going to look like. Now, I will caution you that when you're going to do it like this, you need to take your time pinning or clipping this on. Because I have a line of stitching, it's going to be relatively easy for me to make sure that it's in the right spot. And I should be able to hand stitch that right into place where that stitching is. But that's what it's going to look like. That you're going to have the 1/2 inch binding, and then on the back side it's the same color, so to be a really nice solid color on the back. And that's how we're going to do it. Now you can check some of my other videos that mention mitered borders for how borders are done. But since I'm doing this by hand, what I'll do is I'll stitch to the almost to the edge, a little further than the 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to pull this open like this and fit it together so that on one side the fold is one way and on the other side the fold is the opposite direction, so they kind of nest into each other and they'll make that nice sharp corner. And you need to give it a little bit of extra fabric so that you get the sharp corner and it doesn't want to pull in on itself. That's what I find sometimes if you're new to borders, or not borders, if you're new to binding, that's what will happen is your corners won't be nice and sharp. They'll be kind of rounded because you've not given it enough fabric in that corner. And I've got some just like that. So it's a technique that we learn as we go and we get better every time. So that's how I'm going to do this. And I'm going to stitch the pieces together on an angle so we don't have too much bulk where those pieces go together. So that's what I'll be doing this afternoon, is cutting these pieces, sewing them together on that 45-degree angle, and then ironing them for the binding. And then hopefully during the week, I'll be able to get at least some portion of this sewn on both sides so that we can see it. Now, I think for this, I am going to use the matching purple thread that I have. Let's see if it's handy. Oh, that's brown. It looks like purple in there. I think this is it. It's not quite a match, but it's close enough, I think, that it would do better than white, particularly on the back side. And that would be a situation that I would strongly encourage you to use a matching thread. And we're not going to worry too much about what kind of thread it is for this, because it's just a simple hemming stitch is what it is. So I think that covers it for how we're going to progress on the binding for this quilt. You've had a little peek at how I hand make binding, and you've seen some of the struggles that I've had with not having enough fabric to do what I initially wanted to do, but how we can make a change and use the materials we have and come together with that. If, for example, I had discovered that I was unable to make a binding for this, I could have chosen to go with a white binding instead. And usually you can find a white fabric that matches, and I know for this particular case I do have more of this white fabric. So I think that's it for today. I appreciate you so much joining me today in the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Be sure to like us on Facebook and here on YouTube, and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified if you click that bell of all of our new videos, and check the playlist. We've got our previous videos on this project, and we also have a new project up on applique that we've just started, and we'd love to see you join us there. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time in Shamrock Quilt Studio.